All right, let's kick off another deep dive. Today, we're going deep on something you might not always think about, but it's super important, especially with all these containers everyone's using. We're talking machine identity security.
Okay, yeah.
Got a really interesting blog post here, and I'm really curious to see how we can, make these ideas practical, It's kind of like we're learning the secret code of how machines actually talk to each other and make sure they're legit.
Yeah, it is kind of like that. It really is fascinating how often this stuff gets overlooked.
Right.
I mean, everyone's worried about, their laptops and phones and keeping them safe. But what about everything running behind the scenes, like all the servers and applications, all those algorithms, all that stuff? They got to prove who they are, too, right?
Exactly.
Think about it this way. Every time you use, your banking app, right?
Yeah.
That's connecting to the bank server.
Right.
But there's a whole conversation happening behind the scenes to make sure it's actually your bank and not some, scammer.
So it's like a digital handshake, but way more important than just saying hi.
Oh,
right.
Exactly, yeah.
So what kind of proof are we talking about here?
Okay, so...
Is it like some super complicated password or something?
It's actually more like a bunch of different tools working together.
Okay.
You got SSH keys, which are kind of like unique codes that give you secure access.
Right.
Then there are digital certificates, think of those as digital seals of authenticity.
Okay.
And then API tokens, which are like special permissions.
Got it.
And managing all of that, well, that's where privileged access management, or PAM, comes in.
Okay, PAM. So we're not just letting any old machine walk in and grab sensitive data, right?
Right.
PAM's kind of like the security guard checking IDs at the door.
Yeah, you could say that. But PAM's actually way more proactive.
Okay.
It's not just checking IDs, it's also, changing the locks regularly, watching who's coming and going.
Right.
And basically making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
So PAM's at the heart of keeping things secure, but then things get even more crazy, right, when we add containers to the mix. Containers, they're like those super efficient Lego blocks of software everyone's raving about.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right.
They make development and deployment so much faster and more flexible, but they also create new security challenges.
Because they're so, dynamic.
Exactly. Containers are constantly being created and destroyed.
Yeah.
They can multiply incredibly quickly, and they're all talking to each other in this, super complex network.
It sounds like trying to manage security for a city that's constantly changing, growing,
Yeah.
shifting shape all the time. How does PAM even keep up with all that? I mean, it's one thing to secure, a regular environment, but containers, it's a whole other ballgame.
That's where PAM's strengths become even more important, I think.
Okay.
It gives you this, centralized control, even though everything else is so decentralized. Remember we talked about rotating credentials automatically? Well, with containers, that's not just, a good idea.
Yeah.
It's absolutely essential.
Correct.
Those short-lived credentials are basically temporary access passes.
Got it.
That expire really quickly.
Right.
So if a container does get compromised, the damage is limited.
That makes sense. It's like a self-destructing message, like in a spy movie.
Yeah, like that.
Even if someone gets their hands on it, it's useless after a while.
Exactly.
But how does PAM keep track of all these containers, popping in and out of existence?
So it works closely with platforms like Kubernetes.
Okay.
Kubernetes is like the conductor, right? That's coordinating all the different containers.
Right.
And PAM integrates with it to enforce all the security policies throughout the entire life of a container.
It's like a tag team, right?
Yeah.
Kubernetes keeps things running smoothly. PAM makes sure it all happens securely. Exactly.
But just having PAM isn't enough, right? We need to use it the right way, especially in a container environment.
Oh, for sure. And that's where the whole idea of zero trust comes in.
Zero trust.
Yeah, we can't just assume that because a container is, inside our environment, that it's automatically trustworthy. We have to verify every single one, check its permissions, the whole 9 yards.
Zero trust sounds pretty intense. Is that even realistic, with containers? They're constantly being deployed. Things are moving so fast.
Yeah, it's not about, stopping everything in its tracks.
Right.
It's about making security part of how you build your container environment from the very beginning.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Yep.
Each container has to show its ID, prove who it is, before it's allowed to access anything,
Got it.
Or even talk to other containers.
So even if a container is compromised, it can't just cause chaos.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how zero trust fits into this.
Yeah. Are there other best practices that kind of go along with zero trust?
Yeah, absolutely. They all kind of build on these core principles.
Okay.
Like, let's take secrets management, for example.
Okay.
We know the containers, they need access to sensitive stuff, right?
Right, like passwords and keys.
Exactly. Things like API keys and passwords, database credentials, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do we store all that securely?
Yeah, that seems like a huge vulnerability, if those secrets are just floating around.
Oh, yeah, especially in a container environment where things are so dynamic.
Right.
That's why we have tools like HashiCorp Vault.
Okay.
It's kind of like a super secure vault for storing all that sensitive stuff.
Got it.
And when you integrate Vault with PAM, well, then you can make sure that only the right containers with the right permissions can get access to the secrets they actually need.
Okay, so it's like another layer of protection.
Exactly. It really strengthens that zero trust approach.
It sounds like we're building a pretty serious security perimeter around our container city here.
We are. But there's definitely more to it.
Right.
We also got to talk about things like mutual TLS for secure communication, making sure we're doing regular audits, and of course, automation, to streamline everything and minimize human error.
This is a lot to process, but I'm definitely feeling more confident about how to approach all this container security stuff.
And you should. We've laid a really solid foundation. But, there's one more question I think we really need to think about.
Okay.
As more and more companies use containers and microservices, how do we make sure that security doesn't become a bottleneck?
Right.
How do we keep things secure without, slowing everything down?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Everyone's moving so fast in the cloud. The last thing they want is security to hold them back.
Exactly.
So how do we actually make sure security helps, instead of hinders?
Well, that's probably a whole other deep dive.
Probably, yeah.
But I'll say this. It's all about automation, integration, and making security a priority from the very beginning.
I can't wait to dig into that more, but we've covered a ton today.
We have.
We've gone from the basics of, what even are machine identities to how to keep them safe in this crazy world of containers.
It's really about building trust, right?
Yeah.
Trust at every level, from the individual machine to the whole container environment.
And PAM is our guide in this whole process.
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners out there, if you're working with containers or even just curious about how machines prove who they are, this is just the beginning.
It is.
Stay tuned as we dive deeper into how to lock down those container environments.
We'll be back to talk more about best practices and how you can actually put all this into practice.
Okay, so we talked about zero trust and secrets management, but it still feels like we're just getting started with how to really lock down these container environments,
Right.
What else should we be thinking about?
Okay, well, let's talk about mutual TLS.
Mutual TLS.
Yeah, it's kind of a fancy way of saying you
Yeah.
got to make sure those container conversations are happening on a secure encrypted channel.
Got it.
It's like, imagine each container has a special ID card, right?
Okay.
And a secret code. And only the containers with matching credentials can understand what's being said.
So it's like each conversation has its own private encrypted line, so no one can eavesdrop or mess with the data.
Exactly.
That seems super important, especially with all the sensitive stuff moving around in these microservices architectures.
Yeah, it is.
But doesn't encryption, slow things down? Doesn't it add a lot of overhead?
That's the challenge, right?
Right.
Balancing security and performance.
Yeah.
But the good news is mutual TLS has gotten a lot more efficient.
Okay.
We're not talking about the old clunky encryption anymore.
Right.
It's designed to be lightweight and fast these days, so the impact on performance is pretty minimal.
Okay.
And the security benefits, well, they definitely outweigh that small performance cost.
Security and speed, the best of both worlds. But we've been using a lot of technical terms, so how would you explain mutual TLS to someone who's not a security expert?
Okay, imagine you're sending a postcard, right? Anyone can read it along the way.
Right.
That's kind of like regular communication between containers that's vulnerable.
Okay, yeah.
Mutual TLS is like putting that postcard in a sealed envelope
Got it.
that only the person with the right key can open.
Right.
So it keeps the message confidential and makes sure nobody's tampered with it.
That's a great analogy. So we've got zero trust to check IDs, secrets management to lock down sensitive info, mutual TLS to encrypt the conversations. Anything else we can do to make our container city super secure?
Yeah, let's shift gears a bit and talk about audits and automation.
Okay,
Regular audits are like having security cameras all over your city.
got it.
They let you keep an eye on things, spot anything suspicious, and make sure all your security measures are actually working. But manually reviewing all those logs and events, that can take forever.
Yeah.
And it's easy to miss things.
Right. Humans make mistakes.
Exactly. So that's where automation comes in.
It feels like automation is the key to everything these days.
It really is powerful.
Yeah.
It's like having a whole team of security guards constantly patrolling,
Right.
making sure everything's in order.
24/7, no breaks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best part is you eliminate human error.
Right.
PAM can automatically check if container configurations have any vulnerabilities, enforce security policies, even quarantine suspicious containers.
So it's like a self-healing security system.
Exactly.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
It adapts to the changing environment.
But setting up all that automation, that sounds pretty daunting.
Yeah, it can be. You got to start by understanding your container environment really well.
Okay.
Figure out the specific risks you're facing and what tools are out there to help.
Right.
There are tons of great PAM solutions, both open source and commercial, that offer different levels of automation and integration.
Okay.
The trick is finding the one that fits your needs
Right.
and works well with your existing setup.
It sounds like security is becoming less about manual checks and more about like intelligent systems that
Yeah.
can predict and respond to threats in real time.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
It is, but we can't forget about the human side of things. Even with all this automation, we still need people who understand it all, who can make sense of the data, and make smart decisions about security policies.
Oh, absolutely. Technology is only as good as the people using it.
Right.
We need skilled security professionals to design and manage these complex systems. We need developers who build security into their code from the start.
Yeah.
And honestly, we need everyone in the organization to be aware of the risks
Right.
and know how to stay safe in this digital world.
So it's like we're building a human firewall alongside the technical one.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah. It's a network of people who are informed and aware and actively working to protect themselves and the organization.
But how do we create that kind of security culture?
It starts at the top with leadership.
Okay.
They have to make security a priority and put resources behind it.
Right.
But it's also about empowering teams, not just the security specialists, but developers, operations, everyone.
It all goes back to DevSecOps, doesn't it?
It does.
Breaking down those walls between teams and making security everyone's responsibility.
Exactly. Instead of security being this like roadblock, it becomes a way to build better, more secure software and do it faster.
So security becomes a helper, not a hinderer.
That's the goal.
Okay, I like that. It sounds like we're on the edge of a big change in how we think about security,
I think so too.
moving from reacting to threats to actually preventing them.
Proactive security.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are still some bumps in the road.
Oh, there always are. Technology is always changing, so the threats change too. But the good news is the tools and strategies for fighting those threats, they're changing too.
Okay.
As long as we stay informed, stay aware, and, stay ahead of the curve, we can build a digital future that's both secure and innovative.
It sounds like we're moving beyond the idea of like a fixed perimeter and embracing this more fluid, adaptive approach to security.
Exactly.
But what about specific attacks? Have there been any real-world examples where like bad machine identity management caused a security breach?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
One that comes to mind is the Capital One breach back in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
A misconfigured firewall allowed an attacker to get in and access tons of customer data.
Wow.
It was a pretty complex situation, but the root cause was that they didn't properly authenticate and authorize access.
So even a huge company with like supposedly good security can be vulnerable if they don't manage machine identity as well.
It shows how important this all is.
It's a wake-up call for sure.
It is.
So how do we prevent that kind of thing from happening again? What are the big lessons from that breach that our listeners can use?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is that you need a multi-layered approach to security.
Okay.
You can't rely on just one thing, like a firewall or an intrusion detection system.
Right.
You need multiple layers working together.
So it's like building a castle with walls and a moat and guard towers and everything.
Exactly. Even if one layer fails, the others are there to back it up.
Makes sense. What else can we learn from that Capital One breach?
Well, another big one is the need for strong access controls.
Okay.
We got to make sure that only the right machines and users can access sensitive stuff.
I already do that.
Strong authentication, using the principle of least privilege, and regularly reviewing those permissions.
Got it.
And, of course, constant monitoring.
Right.
You can't just set it and forget it.
Right. You got to stay vigilant.
You got to be watching for anything suspicious, investigate any weird activity, and respond quickly to potential threats.
So it's a shift from reacting to being proactive, right?
Exactly.
Always looking for ways to improve and stay ahead of the attackers.
Yep.
But how do we create that kind of security-focused culture, in a whole organization?
Education and awareness are key. Everyone needs to understand why security matters, what the risks are, and how to protect themselves and the company.
So training, communication from leadership, that sort of thing, making it everyone's responsibility.
Right. But that can be tough, especially when everyone's focused on, shipping new features and meeting deadlines.
Yeah, how do we make sure security doesn't get lost in the shuffle?
That's where DevSecOps comes in.
Okay, DevSecOps again.
It's all about integrating security into the entire software development process.
From the very beginning.
From day one. Planning, design, coding, testing, deployment, operation security is part of it all.
So instead of security being like an afterthought, it's baked in from the start.
Exactly. And it could actually help speed things up. Yeah, because you're catching vulnerabilities early on, so you avoid having to fix them later.
Right. That makes sense.
And when you automate security testing and deployment, it streamlines everything.
Okay, so DevSecOps is more efficient too.
It can be. It's about building secure software faster and better.
This is all starting to click for me, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole machine identity security thing.
Oh, we are. There's so much more to it.
What's the one big thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
Remember this. Security is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's a process of constantly learning, adapting, getting better.
Always evolving.
Technology changes, the threats change, but if we stay informed, follow best practices, and make security a priority, we can build a digital world that's both secure and innovative.
That's a great point. We can't just set it and forget it. We got to keep moving, keep adapting. Wow, we've covered a lot today. Machine identities, containers, security culture. It's been quite a journey. What's next for us in this whole world of machine identity security?
There's still so much to explore. We could dive into specific PAM solutions, how they work with different container platforms.
Right.
We could talk about the new stuff coming out, like using AI and machine learning to fight threats.
Ooh, that sounds interesting.
It is. And we could even get into the ethics of using machine identities, especially as they get used in more and more sensitive applications.
I'm already looking forward to those conversations, but for now, we've given our listeners a ton to think about.
We have. And hopefully we've given them some tools they can use to build more secure and resilient systems.
Absolutely. Remember, everyone, security is everyone's responsibility.
That's right.
Let's all work together to create a digital world where we can trust the machines we rely on. We've talked about so much technical stuff.
We have.
But it feels like there's this bigger picture we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay.
We keep saying trust, right? But how do humans, like our choices and actions, how do those fit into all this machine identity security stuff?
That's a great point.
It's not like the machines are making these decisions on their own, right?
No, absolutely not. All this tech, all these layers of protection, it's all built and managed by people.
Right.
So, yeah, human choices have a huge impact.
For better or worse.
Exactly. Think about it. Setting strong passwords,
Right.
keeping software up to date.
Those basic things.
Yeah, those basic things affect the whole chain of trust.
So even with fancy systems like PAM and all these best practices, human behavior still matters.
Big time. It's like having a state-of-the-art security system, but leaving your front door wide open.
Yeah, that's not going to help.
Exactly. Technology can't solve everything. We need to build a culture of security awareness,
Right.
where everyone understands the risks and takes responsibility for their actions online.
That sounds like a huge challenge, especially as tech keeps getting more and more complex. How do we keep people from just tuning out, or feeling overwhelmed by it all?
It's about finding the right balance
Okay.
between education and empowerment. Instead of just telling people about all the scary threats out there,
Right.
we need to give them the knowledge and the tools to make good decisions.
So instead of saying, don't click on suspicious links, explain how phishing works,
Exactly.
how to spot a fake website, how to report something that looks fishy,
You got it.
give people the power to protect themselves.
That's what it's all about. We're building a human firewall.
Right.
That's just as strong as the technical one.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Yeah.
But it can't just be individuals, right?
Right.
This has got to come from the top down, too.
Absolutely. Leadership sets the tone. They got to make security a priority,
Right.
put resources behind it, and empower teams.
Not just the security folks, but everyone.
Exactly. Developers, operations, everybody plays a role.
It all comes back to DevSecOps, doesn't it?
It does.
Breaking down those silos, making security everyone's responsibility.
That's the key. DevSecOps isn't just about tools and processes.
Okay.
It's about building that culture of shared responsibility. Imagine a world where developers think about security from the very first line of code they write,
Wow.
where security testing is automatic, part of the whole development pipeline.
Right.
And security people are partners, not just like enforcers.
Yeah, working together instead of against each other.
Exactly. And when security is baked in from the start, it can actually make things faster.
Really?
Yeah, you catch those vulnerabilities early. You don't have to go back and fix them later, which can be a huge time saver.
That makes sense. Less rework, less headaches.
Exactly. So DevSecOps is more efficient, it's more secure,
Okay.
it's a win-win.
Yeah, it does sound like a much better approach than the old security as an afterthought way of doing things.
For sure.
But this whole cultural shift, it feels like a long game, you know?
Right.
What can organizations do right now? Like, what are some easy things they can start doing today?
You know, one thing that often gets overlooked is just communication.
Okay,
Make sure everybody knows the security policies, who to contact if they see something weird, and that they can report potential problems without getting in trouble.
So open communication, transparency, a blame-free culture.
Exactly. That helps build that human firewall we were talking about.
Right. It all comes down to trust, doesn't it? Not just between machines, but between people.
You got it. Trust is the foundation of a secure digital world. Trust between machines, trust between people, trust in the systems we use. And we got to build that trust at every level.
This has been an amazing conversation. We've gone from the nitty-gritty tech stuff to the big picture human element of security.
All connected.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's been a real eye-opener to see how technology and human behavior are so intertwined.
I'm glad you feel that way. It's easy to get lost in the technical details.
Right.
But at the end of the day, security is about people.
Protecting ourselves and each other.
Exactly. Protecting our data, our privacy, our digital lives.
We all have a part to play.
We do. It's a shared responsibility to build a more secure and trustworthy digital world.
To all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a new way to think about machine identity security. It's not just about abstract concepts. It's about how we interact with tech, how we build trust, and how we keep ourselves safe online.
Remember, security is a journey, not a destination.
Keep learning, keep adapting, stay in the loop.
And most importantly, stay safe out there.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.